Hey YouTube! Welcome to part 3 of the series Breeding Fish for Profit. So in this episode we're going to talk about choosing your breeding group. So now, I expect that you want to breed fish for profit because you're watching that video, right? But, a good point I want to mention is if you are going to breed fish for profit and you're thinking about starting a fish room and stuff, start thinking about which species that a customer will be able to put together. You want to try to make it so that you're kind of like a one-stop shop, right? So, for example, for us, anyway, we like to breed also with our Mbuna. We also breed we breed bristlenose pleco because lots of the time people want to have something that will clean the tank and stuff, and they're wondering which fish you can put in there. Well, instead of just answering to your client and telling them which fish you put in there, you just say like, oh yeah, I got those one that you can put in there that does it. So usually, they won't go nowhere else. They're already here buying your fish, so they'll buy some of those too in the same time. Uh, Same, like, I don't know, like, maybe you're breeding puffer fish. Well, you want to grow some snails too, because your customer are going to ask you, like, hey, where can I get some snail for this? Well, there you go, like, try to make it a one-stop shop kind of thing. Like, well, you don't need to do, like, start to sell food and aquarium and all that stuff there, but for the fish species, try to, or the invertebrate, try to think about everything that could go together. Like, if you are going to start a tank as a customer, what would you put with those fish? It's super good to be the one that have like lots of knowledge that your customer can walk into your house or come and pick up stuff or contact you and say like, hey, I'm interested in buying a few more fish, what do you recommend? Well, have the fish that you recommend, right? That could go with them. As always, I talk a little bit more about African cichlids, but that can still relate to tropical fish and other kinds of fish. So, breeding group, we're gonna separate that in threes. So, first thing is you'll have some pairs. Uh, so, a male and a female. Breeding groups, which is like a few male and lots of female, or breeding colony, which is a large group. So for the breeding pairs, so those are going to be like Lake Tanganyika, for example, the Lysipini, the compressed Cicep, the Giliochromis. So those you don't have to have as big as of a tank because they're just pairs. So you can end up being able to breed with a smaller tank. So which give you more room to have other tanks for raising fries too. The thing about that is that you cannot have more than a pair in each tank, so as your customers. So that's something to talk about. Now you're going to get more money for your fish, but the downside is people cannot come to you and buy like 20 fish to put in their tank. So you have to think about that. So if in your area they're popular and it's something that you can get away with, then yeah, go ahead and of course breed those fish. We need them in the hobby. So next thing would be the groups. So the groups, we're going to talk more about like Malawi, for example. Breeding groups, most of those fish you can put like 1 to 3 males on your tank, and then you're going to try to aim for probably, I would try to aim for about 8 plus female, and then you're going to have a constant breeding happening and fry supply and stuff. And same with those. You can also those one from Lake Malawi especially, you can mix lots of different species together in a tank. So, well, for breeding purposes, you want to try to keep your tank species only because it's easier to keep the fish pure. But for customer point of view, it's if you breed like 5 species, and they might all be able to go together, so they might be able to throw them all in the same tank. So now that customer or that fish store might ask to get like 10 or 20 fish at the time or something like that, right? So you can move lots of fish that way. So for those breeding group example, you have apes, peacocks, and bunas. So those have tons and tons of species. And then you can also go to Lake Victoria, or import fish from Lake Victoria, or buy fish from Lake Victoria, like the zebra obliquidin, for example. Lake Victoria has lots of fish that look kind of similar. With the zebra pattern, it's just the color on their body change spot, or they have more green, more blue, whatever. Now the downside of Lake Victoria is that most of those fish, because they look similar, they cannot go together because you'll have some inbreeding, crossbreeding, sorry. And then for the breeding group, if you want to go Lake Tanganyika, then there's those gentle giant, the frontosas. Those need a really big tank because those fish gets huge. For a customer point of view, they're interesting too because it's going to be a huge tank. You can keep a large group. And you can also, because they're gentle, even though they're big, then the customer can end up putting other fish with them. Like, as long, the golden rule there, don't put anything that can fit in their mouth. And last thing is the breeding group for the colonies. So those I would think about Tropheus. Tropheus, usually you want to keep 12 and up for the members. They're not as fancy for male to female ratio, so you can have like 1 to 2, 1 male per 2 female. Now the larger the group, the easier those fish are to keep. So like for example, like I had a harder time when I had like 20 in my 90 gallon, and now I have 38 of them. The group is doing awesome. Now, for breeding purposes though, like you want to have way more female than male, which I have lots of fish like that because I grow them from fries. I bud them at 1 inch, and then I'm growing them to adult, and then I'm going to like fix the ratio soon. A couple things to know about the fish species is some of them are not going to color up too fast. Like for example, some of the mbunas that we keep, most of them will color up like under 1/4 inch long, but if you keep apes and peacocks or some of the other mbuna, they might not color up until they're 2 inch plus, so that will make it harder to sell sexed fish. Which brings another point. Some of the species, both male and female, are going to be colorful, which means that it's easy to sell to lots of customers, both sex. While other species, the males are nice and colorful, but the female are grayish, which is going to be harder to sell the female if you can sell the female. Sometimes the customers will only want male, and if you sell to other places they might only order males, so now you need to know what you're going to do with all of those females. So you can either sell them as feeder fish or start another big aquarium and just put all of them in there and they can live a happy life. But don't forget, like, you'll probably have 50% of your fish that are going to be female. So if you're going to be stuck, breed hundreds of fish and be stuck with 50% of them that are female and you cannot sell them, then you better have a backup plan about this. It's not fun to think about, but it's something that you should think about before you get into this breeding for profit. All right, now next, where are you gonna go get your breeding group? Well, there's a few options. So if you watched the last video about fish quality, then you know that you can go with Wildcat. Wildcat, you'll have to deal with trench shipper or importers, and maybe order online. Now be careful, look at the red list and find out how to cross the border with those fish if they're not already in the country. Because if they're not legal in your country, they might get stopped at the border, and even though the fish will suffer and die, like, this border security just stops them from coming in. They might make them return, but by that time it's probably too late. So yeah, make sure that you find out all the rules about making those fish come to you. The other option that you have is to go deal with an importer, which the importer sometime will import lots of fish and already have them in stock, ready to go. So now, like with Wildcat, the cost of the fish and breeding group is super high because of all the shipping, airfare, all that stuff there. But you'll get, like, the exact fish from the lake, exact color that nature give them without getting modified or touched by human, right? Now those fish, though, you might, or your importer might already done that. You might have to deworm them and treat for parasite. So now if you want to, have the good quality without all the headache of, like, finding out how to cross the border with those fish, or like all the issue that the Wildcat might have, because the other thing too, it's Wildcat might be more stressed too when you put them in a tank, right? They're used to swim in a lake. So yeah, now if you don't want those headache, you can get super good quality too and find a breeder that breeds the Wildcat and then buy F1 or F2 from them. And then, yeah, you'll still have the good color of the fish. It's as close as the natural fish as you can get. And then the cost usually is not as much too, because you don't have to ship them, like, from country to country in, like, pounds and pounds of water. Because that's where most of the costs, believe me or not, is going to go, right? Because the thing is, the people that catch the fish, they don't make that much money. Like, it's the air fees and all that stuff that are gonna gouge the price. So how do you find a breeder? Well, yeah, if in your country you might have Craigslist, you might have KGG. That's what I use here. You might have access to Facebook groups. And forums and all this that you can find in your area. There's also fish clubs that you can go to. Usually fish clubs have lots of breeders that are going there. So yeah, those are all good ideas. Now, if you're just starting and money's tight, or you don't want to spend a fortune on getting started, or you're just doing that for fun and have a little bit of extra cash, or you're having trouble to find a species, there's no problem about going to your fish store and then like look at the best fish that they have or the best color one, like, and then make sure that the group is big enough. That's gonna be the hard part there, is to get a group that you can actually sex, male and female, because usually the fish store will get the fish when they're pretty small, from breeder or importers, and then they'll just resell them on sex. So if you go that route, then you might have to do the waiting game, and just, you want it, I don't know, 12 fish in your breeding group or something like that. So you might have to go and buy 20 and then just grow them up. And then when they're ready to sex, just vent them and then keep a few male, 2, 3 male. Usually it's better either 1 or 3 or 4 or 5, depending how big your breeding group is going to be. You don't want 2 males, especially for African cichlids usually, because the males from the same species are really aggressive towards each other. So you want to have like either one single male or lots of males to spread the aggression. I have a video about spreading the aggression. I can link it up here somewhere. I also have a video about venting the fish, or Martin have a video about it. Anyway, I'll try to put the video here too. So earlier when I was saying about the fish store, going to get the fish at the fish store to get them a bit cheaper and stuff like that, like I'm talking about tank rays, right? But you can also look for breeder for that. Some breeder will have tank rays for a really affordable price. Just be careful not to get fish that they're going to mix together or that are already mixed together. And the hobby and then the breeder's highs, crossbred fish are pretty much garbage, and you cannot ask too much money for that. They're not worth anything. Now, don't get me wrong with that. Lots of people like them, and if you're gonna crossbreed fish, that's fine. Just try to keep them for yourself or for your family and friends and stuff. Or if you're going to sell them, then make sure that you advertise them as crossbred fish and try to say which species they're mixed with or something like that, so that people can kind of expect what they are, and temperament too. But even though temperament, if you're gonna crossbreed fish, then it's a total gamble which temperament of which species is gonna bring out, or which color is gonna bring out too. And then the baby of a crossbreed might just, do a different color of baby altogether too, right? So anyway, if that's your thing, that's your thing. Yeah. Okay, another important thing too, it's if you have fish species that you decide to go with that are supposed to be live in group or in colony, don't pair them. Don't do the 1 male and 2 female thing and just put them in a tank like this by themselves, because usually those fish that are used to be in a colony or a group, they will not work fine as a pair or a trio. Usually the male will harass the female non-stop. So you want to make sure that the groups are big enough. Like, I would suggest 8+, and then the colony 12+. I wouldn't even do Tropheus at 12 actually. In my experience, it doesn't work. You'll find lots of stuff online and on forum that says like at least 12 or 12 is okay. I don't think so. I think you should go like 20+. But anyway, this is my 2 cents. But if you're watching that video, maybe you're interested in my 2 cents. So hopefully last week you guys watched the part 2 video of the fish quality, and that's gonna help you choosing a little bit better your breeding group. I would go with the best quality that you can afford, and that should give you the best fish and the best colors. So I hope you liked that video. That was part 3 of the fish breeding, choosing your breeding groups. Hopefully that was informative enough for you. If you have any question or comment, don't hesitate to contact me. Leave a message below. I'll be more than happy to answer your question or help you out. If you haven't watched last video about the fish quality, I'll put this above somewhere. Go and watch that. You can also watch part 1. Part 1 is the intro, which I talk about everything, like all the video that I'm going to make in that series, so you can kind of know what's gonna come up soon. So next video is going to be about setup. Yeah, aquarium setup. So we're gonna talk about that, like how to set up your breeding group and how many tanks you're gonna need for the fries and all of this good stuff there. So subscribe and like. Don't miss the next video. Watch the other video if you missed them. And yeah, and then after that, then we're going to start talking about cost and all this other fun stuff. I'm sure you want to find out all about that. All right, cheers.